Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life. Hey everybody, welcome back. I've got my friend Joel Levan on again of Radius Factor Combatives. Really good Filipino martial artist and kickboxer, very practical minded. And I think we're going to start out most likely talking about bladed weapons for EDC, I think is what we discussed talking about. So just real quick for the guys that weren't here for your other appearances, can you tell them a little bit about yourself, Joel?
Yep. Like you said, my name is Joel Levan, and I run a company called our consultancy, let's say, called Radius Factor, and that basically is a consultancy that gives you the shortest skill to the shortest path to the quickest skill, and kind of try to apply that to everything we do. And I've been training for 34 years, and Radius Factor kind of came into the picture right around, I'm gonna say 2012-ish. And prior to that, it was called Sente Systems or Sente Martial Systems. And I wanted something a little bit more broad. So that when we go from how to train martial arts more practically and quicker to start to add in like firearm tactics and bladed weapons and things like that. So, and then just apply that to even like everyday survival. So that's kind of where we're at.
And that's something that like we've talked about this before, and I feel pretty strongly about is I think, and it's one thing if you shoot purely as a sport, just like it's one thing if you fight purely as a sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a self-defense oriented person or somebody who does it for a living, like I think firearms training should be a martial art, should be trained like a martial art.
I agree. And again, and I'd like to have your opinion on this too. When you say martial art, what does that mean? Because I know I had a discussion with one of my former instructors about this, and I said the same thing. It should be trained more like a martial art. And he's saying, no, it should be, and I guess his answer, though maybe a little bit convoluted, more geared more toward tactics, and which we were kind of saying the same thing. It just, he had a different way of saying it, but broken down in a way that per methodology and things like that. That's what, to me, that's what martial arts would mean, and not the, what a lot of people say art is. If you want to train combatives or you want to train martial arts or arts, go paint. And to me, it's like, well, that's the opposite of what that means. It's not the floral and kind of aesthetic part of it, but it's the art. Art means skill. So developing skill and craft.
Well, and also I think there's an implied truth there, I think. So we talk about something being an art as much as it is a science.
Mm-hmm.
That means that there's like a subjectivity and an instinctual nature to things that you have to develop and have to like build a kind of a sensitivity to, I guess is the best way to put it. And I don't mean sensitivity like, like flower arranging. That's not what I mean, but just like a sense of understanding
Sure.
the stuff that is hard to quantify,
mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you talk about sensitivity. I mean, we've got visual is a big one, right? Physical sensitivity, and how to respond in any of those scenarios where if it's out of contact, a lot of it's visual, right? So you're not going to have any kind of contact, so you can't have the physical part. But as soon as it gets into physical, then you got to be able to work with that energy and use that against your opponent. Or
well, I think anybody that's done grappling, they may not use the phrase sensitivity to describe it.
Yeah,
but they're not good grapplers if they don't have it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's and that's like an analogy I use a lot when I talk about shooting too, as a matter of fact.
You can look at somebody doing a grappling technique from the outside and not understand what makes it work.
Yes.
And shooting's the same way. You can look at someone's grip from the outside and not understand what actually makes it work. You can make yours look like theirs, but it won't be as effective as theirs if you don't truly understand it.
Yeah. I think that applies for just about everything, right? Even especially a lot of Filipino martial arts or EDC with what I do. There's a whole lot that goes unnoticed and sometimes criticized because they don't know exactly what's happening and why. Especially like when you see a lot of our training, a lot of people think it's long range training, or in Largo right? Which
Right.
to a point it is, but anytime you hear a contact, that's essentially a close quarter strike that you've interrupted. So instead, the close quarter would have been, a strike to the head or neck or something, but you've intercepted that halfway through.
Well, and I think there's a truth there too. Well, here's another rabbit hole we've already gone down to.
Right.
We haven't even gotten through your introduction yet.
Like 7 minutes.
So, I don't agree with the truism that all fights wind up on the ground. That is not true.
I agree.
What is true is that unless someone is incapacitated first, all fights wind up in grappling range. Unless somebody gets incapacitated before it gets there. Because it's just a natural progression of it. You even watch like the European stuff where they're in armor. Mm-hmm. And they're swinging around battle axes and pole arms and swords, but they wind up rolling around on the ground by the time it's done.
Yeah. It's funny. I think you and I were talking about this online. I said that there's a lot more grappling in those in HEMA, or than I had realized. And I was working with a guy out of Boston. He came down to train with me, and we were talking, and we exchanged tactics and history and whatnot. And I didn't realize how much grappling was done with their sword, which is, and it's kind of crazy. Well, it's crazy, but it's not, because they have armor. It's going to end up there because once you clash, and I can see people making that case for empty hand training. If someone is almost like a kamikaze and they want to run right through you, and if you don't move or incapacitate them before it happens, you are going to have some sort of clash where it's going to be in like an ugly grapple. But
and that's why I gave the caveat. I mean, obviously, if you defeat the threat before it gets there, it'll stop before it gets there.
Yeah.
But if it goes unchecked, it's going to wind up there.
Yeah.
And even Japanese martial arts. I mean, that's the origin of Aikido and Aikijujutsu. It's all sword movements. It was all grappling with blades. And they just transferred it to empty hands when things got more civilized after World War II.
It's interesting. And more even, I have a karate background or Kempo background, so it's which is not that it's not the traditional part of it, but or of that type of martial art. But you get to see, the more you go down those rabbit holes, you get to see how much more grappling actually is in karate than what people do for sport or whatever.
There's a really good channel on YouTube for anybody that wants to kind of do a deep dive into that. A guy named Jesse Inkamp. He's a European.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of stuff on the bunkai, the application of the kata.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it's grappling. A lot of it looks like judo or jujutsu once you figure out what it means,
Yeah, that's good.
Well, and then how much grappling's in Aikido Tertia? There's a lot in there.
There is.
And people don't think of that either when they think of Filipino stuff, right?
Yeah. And again, it's funny, when they look at the knife, it's kind of like a tool to teach you grappling. Not necessarily that it would go exactly the way to do, because there's a lot of intricate moves that they work, but it really does teach you how to weave in and out of the arms and how that connects to the neck, and then going for a takedown and how you can get a hook, a grab in some way, but it's with a knife. And it almost forces you to simplify in a way, not hang out in one spot too long, because when we're talking about a weapon engagement, especially an edge weapon, that you can be cut just about everywhere, in any context. So you have to be at the right position at the right time. So it's like if you condense that in the right way, you can learn parts of grappling really quickly, even with striking as the kind of the overlap.
Yeah, it's the whole people confuse the medium with the message a lot, right? Especially in training, I think. And that's all kinds of training. Whether we're talking firearms or edge weapons or any of this. It's really easy to look at the medium, the lessons being transferred through, and think that's the message. But it's not. It's the coaching. It's the learning process.
Yep.
Like some of the intricate drills in Filipino martial arts, and people look at that and they think of it as just this kind of lifeless dance where you're doing the same 12 things over and over again. And it's really not. I mean, it's especially once you get the pattern down, everybody starts improvising off the pattern and reacting to what the other person's doing, right? And that's no different than like the Japanese swordsmanship I did, where it was a two-man kata, a two-man form. But if you did the slightest thing wrong, the instructor was going to. It felt like you were putting your head inside a Cuisinart. He'd hit you so many times with it, right?
Right.
And it should be a living thing, not a lifeless thing, right?
Yeah. Who was it? Who was the guy from? Was it Matt Thornton from Straight Blast?
Straight Blast Gym, yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking about how because he was like I said, he was an Inosanto guy. Yeah. At one point, and he was talking about all the dead drills that happen, which happen in almost every system, not just Filipino martial arts, but especially in FMA, where no one's moving. You're just stuck in this same position, and you're just working pattern. Which to me, that's of course that's not fighting. That's a drill, and it's a very baseline drill, and it really shouldn't have to be there for that long. Even if it's a basic, when we're talking learning the 5 attacks, or forehand diagonal, backhand diagonal, high and low. You can do those in close quarter, but it doesn't mean, and you're actually hitting weapons, but that doesn't mean anything other than you understand the energy that you just hit with a weapon to weapon contact, and maybe the follow through if you train it correctly, but no one's going to be that close doing those type of strikes exactly that equal timing. So you're just learning equal timing. You're learning where to hit on the weapon, and then eventually the follow through or you engage or go through them or disengage to back out the long range. But staying in all those ranges for like 30, 40 drills is just insane to me, because you lose out on all the other stuff you should be learning.
Well, and here's something to get your thought on. So I kind of look at that stuff like. And I'm not a musician, right? Which is like God's cruel joke, because I love music and I'm horrible. Like, you do not want to hear me try to play or sing. It's completely abysmal, right?
Same.
But I do love music. And I kind of feel like fighting is like jazz, right? You play off the melody and off the beat. But you can't play off the melody and off the beat if you can't play the beat and play the melody.
If you don't have the fundamentals.
And that's kind of what I think of those drills as. Like, you're learning the melody so that then you can learn to move past it, to move off of it.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say yes and no to that, just because I have a different distinction. But overall, yes, because you can do the simplest drill. Even what I train is we try to simplify it as much as possible. You can be stuck in that drill mode and not able to adapt if you don't learn how to adapt. So, but it's like that on every level. So you just take that to whatever pattern or whatever drill you're doing, or I prefer to say tactic, because there's tactics is going to be it's going to be different. Let's say techniques are going to be within the tactic, right? And then when the timing changes, the technique changes. So, but it might be within that same tactic. But yeah, if you're not training to adapt, or if you're stuck in that pattern, you're never going to learn it. Especially if you're looking at what target you're actually trying to hit, whether it's the hand, which is going to be a primary one because that's what's holding the weapon, or somewhere in the arm, and then taking the eyes, sometimes in the hip. But if they're not training to hit that hand while it's moving, it's like how are you ever going to hit it? That's almost impossible.
Well, and it's to bring it back around to shooting, right? Like, one of the big benefits, I think, from competitive shooting that applies to defensive shooting is an attribute not a technique or a tactic. And to make the distinction, right? So an attribute is a physical or mental skill you're developing that isn't a technique. It's not how good is my jab or how good is my cross or how good is my round kick or how good are my number 1 and number 2 strikes, right? It's not that. It's what's my perceptual speed on visual input? What's my sprint speed off the explosive start? What's my hand speed from a dead stop? Like those physical attributes and mental attributes that you're training. And competitive shooting makes you see things faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can use that when you actually apply it in the context of a defensive shooting encounter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that that was one of the benefits of the way that the Filipino arts start with the weapons first and then go to empty hands, because the end of the stick is moving so much faster than the fist is.
Mm-hmm.
So you get that kind of acclimatized. I think that's the right word. I pronounced it wrong like 3 times. Something like that.
We'll go with it.
you acclimate yourself to that speed.
Right.
And then something slower seems very slow to you, where before it might have seemed very fast.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, right off of that, one of my shooting instructors would talk about, if you want to be fast, you want to shoot fast, you got to get used to the speed.
Yeah.
So like moving it in any way, there's being able to accelerate and decelerate, or deceleration is just as important as acceleration. So because you can overcommit, you can overturn. It's the same thing with striking. But I think one of the things that a lot of Filipino martial arts don't, I say instructors, not necessarily the arts themselves, but the instructors don't put too much distinction in is the judgment skills. So we're talking about all the speed, and we're talking about the angles, and tracking the hand, and the visual perception of everything. How do you learn? There should be a training methodology for the judgment of it. So range and timing, angle, right? Different types of manipulations, but being able to judge that in a way that it's intuitive. It's something.
Yeah, no, definitely. I got a couple thoughts on that. We'll eventually finish your intro.
Yeah, it's all good.
So, one is when I was doing Shotokan karate when I was a kid, there was a guy. He was older than me because I was a teenager, and he was like in his 30s. And I couldn't touch him whenever we fought, whenever we sparred. Like I couldn't do anything, right? And it used to frustrate me because I didn't get it because I was a kid. I didn't understand the truth of it yet. I was younger, faster, in better shape, and had better technique than him because he barely even trained anymore. He would just come in and train whenever he felt like it. And he would just wipe the floor with me. But the reason is he could see what I was going to do, and I couldn't see what he was going to do. He had that ability to discern what his opponent was doing and read their intent, read their body language, read their motion, capture their timing. And that's a skill that has to be developed. And I would argue that's far more important than how good your jab or your cross is. And then the second note on this that popped in my head was, and this would apply in today's climate, legal and political, it would apply to all kinds of self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to stop in time is every bit as important as the ability to start when you shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's one of the arguments I give when I teach, application of shooting. We all love to split fast, pull the trigger fast, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't develop that skill because it does a lot of things for your attributes and your technique that are important. But that doesn't mean you shoot as fast as you can in application. And I mean by pure trigger speed. I don't mean getting the sights on the target or transitioning from target to target. That needs to be done as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But if I pull the trigger at 0.15 and human reaction time is for a trained person in the 0.2s, I can't stop when I have to stop. And that can matter for legalities for the fight after the fight these days.
Yeah, good point.
And I would say the same thing, like some of the really fast knife work in any of the Filipino arts. You fall into that pattern of, the 3-cut combination or whatever it is, and something happens that you have to change or stop. You have to be able to react in time and do that. Right.
So that's a lot of reasons why just doing those pattern or those combination drills don't really work ultimately for in most contexts. So,
Right.
you know, you got to be able to, you have to have that. It's almost like seeing outside of your body as you're moving and striking. It's almost that the other part of you has got to see when and where to do the certain things, right? So or how to, like we talked about, stopping. And I tell a lot of my guys now that I train, self-defense situations, you take somebody down, maybe you've already struck him a few times after he's threatened you, and you end up taking him down, and then you don't discern whether or not he's a threat at that point or not. Maybe he's knocked out and you stomped on his head. You're going to prison. So you got to be able to have that wherewithal and your wits about you when you and see what's in front of you. And a lot of it just comes right back to training. I know a lot of people talk about the adrenaline dumped and all that stuff, but I think, you know, a lot of that stuff, and the more you can, when you get into a fight or something, or any kind of fight, and you don't have the training, all that kind of just comes out, and you don't have an ability to control it. Whereas the more training you get, you know, for the most part, you can train out, you can control a lot of that, which allows you to stay, you know, present.
Well, it goes back to that whole stress inoculation theory, right? The more I've seen even a simulation of an event, the calmer I can be when reacting to the actual event.
Yeah.
All right. So edge weapons for EDC. I want to hear your thoughts on this, because this is definitely in your ballpark.
Well, you know, I think it really comes down to a couple different perspectives or lenses. If you want to just talk about what's effective, and then what's legal, depends on which lens you want to look through. But if you just want to look at things that are effective, you know, it's almost, you can't divide those up, because once you divide those up, then you've got to act, you know, what are really effective, whether it's a knife or, you know, a firearm, in the context that you're using it, you have to be able to use it in a certain way. So, but if we're just going to say straight up, what's a good knife, say, something that's straight, strong, and sharp.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be, you know, the size is going to come into play when you've got to, you know, give yourself more range, or the penetration, or actual protection. If you got a bolo, it's going to protect you more. But we're not walking around with bolos, you know. Though I think,
it is legal to carry a sword in Texas.
In Texas, yep. I was just going to say, yep. Not so much in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is it's kind of a mess that way, because for all hunters, there's no limit on the size of knife that you can carry. But you go into even a certain township, and they may say you can only have a 2-inch knife. Well, I'm not sure how you navigate all that, you know, because if you're going in even a tiny little town, and most cops don't really care, and I don't think they really should, because it's, you know, that 2 is an arms thing. We can jump into the Second Amendment on that one, but you know, but getting back to the whole knife thing, we talked about straight, strong, and sharp, something that doesn't have too much of a curve.
Yeah.
Where you can go between a forward or a blade and a blade out. You know, so like this one here, it's fairly, you know, I don't like the butt end of this, where your thumb placement might be. It's going to be a little tough, but you can kind of get around that. But it's straight enough where the center line of that knife from that tip to here is pretty straight to where the thumb is down to the point. And for accuracy, I think that's a really good thing. Much like if you had a pencil or a pen, you know, something straight as that. If this starts to curve down there, then, you know, wherever you think you're going to hit perceptually, maybe it's going to be lower, and that goes lower than a target. So that kind of matters, like a karambit versus, you know, a straight knife. I'd much prefer a straight knife.
You know, you're not the only person I know who's trained with karambits that says that. And I mean, they look cool, right? They're very exotic. They look neat. They look cool. Flipping them around with the ring looks really sexy in movies, but I don't know that I'd ever flip it around with the ring anyway. I look at the ring as just weapons retention, or how to draw the thing if you've got it in deep concealment.
Yeah.
And I know the theory of the curve is that it enables you to hit a little sooner, but we're probably not dueling knife versus knife.
Yeah.
Like Jim Bowie on the sandbar, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And in that case, like we're talking about the Gnunting, it's the same thing. I think I have to go through my gear bag here, but we talked about the Gnunting versus the straight weapon being like this. And in a Gnunting, if you matched it up, it would curve out this way, right? We're talking about a long weapon, 26-inch blade or whatever it would be. That matters at that point because you're at a different range. When you're so close with a karambit, I don't know, that's probably not going to matter so much as the kinetic energy or the way it's curved to get more of an effect, into the muscle or into being able to control things like that. But
now, what are your thoughts on? And I know what mine are, but I want to hear yours on folder versus fixed blade for carry.
Fixed blade.
Yep.
Less moving parts, and as soon as you grab that thing, it's ready to go. Folder, just having that thing, fumbling around with the thumb, and I know it's got to be. There's only one folding knife that I felt like had the best thumb action on it, and wasn't like a wave feature, other than a wave feature pulling out of the pocket. But Brian Biegler of Biegler Blade Works has one of the smoothest knives as a folder knife that I've ever felt, and it's a pretty sweet knife. Now, I don't know if I'd want to carry that, and then if I use it, what are you going to do with it if you use it? You just lost, a $400 knife or whatever. But go with the cheaper ones. But yeah, the fixed blade, I think all the way. And like I said a minute ago, I really like the ring, like the karambit style ring. Like we had the sock P knives in SF, which had the ring on the end, but they were a straight double-edged little stiletto, basically. Yeah.
And what was great about that is you could put it behind your kit and have just that ring sticking out. You can still access it. And I like that for plainclothes carry too, because it's easy to deep conceal it. It's easy to tuck it in your waistband, and you can get to it without having it stick and print, 3, 4, 5 inches above your waistline.
And probably get to it in weird positions too. So if you're crammed up in some way, or you're trying to cut your seatbelt or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
A little easier to stick your finger in there and kind of hook it, as opposed to just, maybe you can't really grab it or whether, so with that ring, I would imagine that it affords you that ability to be able to do that more often or more easily, I should say. I
also like it as a firearms guy, not for the John Wick greatest fans fight scene where they're twirling him around. Like I said, it looks really cool, but I don't think there's a lot of practical value in it. Yeah. What I do like the ring for is if you have to go to your sidearm, your pistol, you can then let that knife just hang off your finger.
Yep.
And you don't lose it.
Yeah. That's I've seen that's becoming more and more popular in the last last 10 years, maybe seeing that a lot more of that, as opposed to ditching the knife and going directly to the gun.
I think that came from Thompson and the SOC-P program. Like I really do. I think that's where that kind of made its way into firearms culture. Was through that avenue. And it's a good training program, and it's a good knife, and it's not horribly expensive. You won't lose a huge amount of money if you have to use it, like you said. But I like it a lot. So, second part about EDC and blades. I saw an interesting conversation. It's actually Rogan on his podcast, where they were talking about martial arts for self-defense. And they started talking about Eskrima and Kali and Arnis. And they were getting into the fact that most people don't have, I don't want to say the stomach for it, maybe the understanding of what it means to actually cut somebody.
Yep.
And that's got to be a factor too. I mean, it's like having the pistol and being afraid to use it, right? You're doing yourself more harm than good. I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I agree. It's something to do with it being attached to the hand and you directly to that body and what it does. And I think it's almost like people have road rage actually, road rage is a perfect example, I think. As long as they're inside their car, they feel like they're safe and they can mouth off, right? Same thing with a computer. Someone 2,000 miles away, you can you can argue with them, but in the same room, they're totally civil. So you don't have that sort of connection to the knife and being cut. And what did who was it that did Mark Denny say? It's you got to go to a dark place.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people really think about it, as they really connect to that. You can almost feel that the knife, if you're talking about cutting or thrusting, and there's something about that psychologically it's more eerie to them than a firearm. It's a standoff weapon that you can shoot, and it's it just doesn't have the same sort of gory feel to it. But I think that's why FMA. That's one of the reasons why FMA hasn't taken off nearly as much as, say, jiu-jitsu or kickboxing. That's one reason. I have other reasons, but and I always tell people, don't focus so much on the blade. This is also a training tool. It trains your brain because you can't make a mistake with it. And once you get close, it's just as effective as a gun, if not more effective. And you can almost get cut in every single direction. So that being, see, if you were going to learn jiu-jitsu and then somebody produces a knife in a guard, where's your attention go? It goes right to the knife, or goes to the hands. So it frames that, it gives you that purposeful constraint right away. If you train it right. If you're training mutual destructions, then it doesn't take any training for that. But if you're aware of what the knife can do, it kind of shapes where your brain goes and your perception goes.
And I don't think everybody is aware. Like it's a sobering thing what a knife does to somebody. Like it's no small thing.
Right.
And I'm in complete agreement with you. At arm's length, you don't have any significant advantage, maybe even a disadvantage, with a gun versus a knife.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's incredibly effective.
Yeah, like it can destroy flesh and ligaments and everything, no matter where you move it, and whether you're pulling it or moving it forward. Whereas maybe a gun, you got to get it on. You got to get the barrel to go right toward target. Whereas a knife, as long as you can pull that off, somebody grabs you, get the knife over top, pulling that out right away, it's like instant damage. But a lot of people just see that blade, and I don't know if it's ingrained in our DNA somehow. It's just they get that pucker factor real quick, and it happens with firearms too. I remember having a interaction when I was in a different field, and they saw a firearm on screen, and they had this real visceral reaction to it. Like it was just on a screen. It wasn't even like live, so it's digital, and they just gave them the chills. And I think it also tells you how weak our society has gotten, or unaware. But yeah, good. You can jump in.
Yeah, no. So like I mean, I think that's part of it, right? If you're talking about carrying a knife for defending yourself, a big part of it is having the understanding of what it's going to entail if you have to use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to do so if you need to, because not everybody, like you said, especially in today's society, not everybody has got the right mental conditioning to be able to follow through on something like that.
Yeah.
Or at least follow through effectively.
Yeah.
Instead of following through, half-heartedly, which is going to do more harm than good, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of pulls into the third piece of it, right? Is the legality of it. Like it's very much deadly force. I mean,
yeah,
death or great bodily harm is right there on the edge of the blade. So you got to make sure that, just like you can't pull a gun if somebody yells at you,
right?
I mean, you physically can, but you legally can't, right?
Yeah, right.
you probably shouldn't employ an edged weapon if somebody just throws a sucker punch at you either, unless you can articulate disparity of force. Right.
Right.
And like, that's one place where, like in my previous life in law enforcement, you'd have an easier way of articulating, because you have a gun on you. And if you get knocked out, if you get taken down for the count, then it's every fight a cop is in is potentially life or death.
Yeah.
And for everybody listening, I'm not saying that cops should pull knives out and start stabbing people just because they threw a punch at them. That's not what I meant. But what I mean is that if you're losing the fight, if you're fighting over your gun and you're losing the fight and you know you're going to lose it, that then becomes a deadly force situation as a cop.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, at what point, and then, you know, that's the things I hate about the laws on knives. And there are a lot more cases where you can make the case for that if you were in that scenario, you pulled the knife, that guy had a gun, or he had another knife, it would be self-defense if you're protecting yourself, versus, you know, somebody just trying to punch you, or they grabbed you, or, you know, whatever, and you started to go to work on them with a knife, and then that's an entirely different scenario. Even though it's a lot easier, it's not that hard to deploy a knife and thrust. I mean, if you can chop ice, you can do a lot of damage on somebody's, you know, femoral, or, you know, parotid or something, you know. So it doesn't take a whole lot of skill in that sense, which I always try to divert people back over to. There's the perception of the blade that people see. Like, why would you ever want to learn how to knife fight? Well, it's not about the blade per se, as it is what you get from it. So it's not what it is, but what it does, with the brain and perception, and where you know you have to be so you're not cut. So it's a much more, it's a higher contrast incentive than, say, empty hands, where you can, you know, something glances off of you, it's not that big of a deal, but you couldn't do that. You couldn't do the same thing with a knife. It'd be much more destructive. So there's a lot more to the training methodology if you're training it correctly, versus what it actually does for a self-defense tool itself, with like a weapon. And that's where a lot of my training and my perspective, how it differs from other, let's say, knife instructors or the proprietary type of self-defense schools or instructors out there that have their knife training or whatever, EDC training. We put a lot of emphasis on the training methodology and how you bridge the gap, or how do you evade without getting hit, and then being able to use your judgment, or how to develop your judgment skills so you can time that weapon. And then when you don't have a weapon or don't have a knife, you still have your empty hands, and that still applies. Nothing changes. The range is going to end up being the same. You're just using a different tool. You're using a natural weapon versus an actual, you know, bladed weapon. And I think a lot of Filipino martial arts get that wrong in that way, where they don't really connect those two. So the glue that happens, the stuff that happens in between, gets lost. And then, you see it in Pequea Tertiary, where they'll just slash and thrust all the way to the ground, pop, 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 pop. And people see that and they're like, well, that's murder. You know, you got to be able to stop with somebody. But, you know, there's a training methodology for that, because you can transition to empty hands and it's the same thing. But it's not real good for public visual consumption.
So back when I was at Fort Bragg, my initial exposure to Filipino martial arts was as part of basically an offshoot of Jeet Kune Do. It wasn't pure JKD anymore. It was like an offshoot of it. And the instructor is a phenomenal instructor and a really good guy. I'm not going to say his name in this context, but I have a lot of respect for him. I really like the guy. But his VHS tapes that he released in the 80s for self-defense with a knife was homicide. Like straight up. Like it was, you know, just like you're talking about it. I'm like, you know, in the context of a bar fight, when somebody insults your wife, I don't know if I would take that particular course of action.
Right. Yeah. And there's guys who still don't make that distinction. Or even why put it out there, even in video? I know it's like the authentic part of the culture or whatever. But, you know, Instagram isn't an authentic part of a It's not historical. This is totally talking about the modern day context and people that are seeing that kind of thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why it gets a bad rap.
Well, it's especially when you add in the fact that the internet has no nuance, right?
Yeah.
The internet doesn't understand context or nuance or a caveat to anything. It's just straightforward, black and white, binary, on off is the only way people react. And that's a whole nother problem with things, both training wise and as far as society goes today, I think, is that lack of context and nuance. A thing can be true and still not be universal. And a thing can be true in context and still be a very bad thing in a separate context.
Yeah.
And people can't seem to make that distinction anymore.
Yeah. Talking about that, say like in your case, a military context versus a civilian context, and how you would deploy a knife. When we're talking about battle or war, something's going. There's a lot of footage now going around with the Russia versus Ukraine and some of the knife engagements that happened to the death with a bladed weapon. And under the rules of engagement there, we're talking about that's normal, right?
Well, we had a guy on one of my trips to Afghanistan that he had a malfunction with his rifle, and it was 3 bad guys. And he wound up, I wasn't there, he wasn't on my team, so I don't know if he was unable to get to his pistol because they swarmed him or what exactly happened. But he wound up killing 3 bad guys with a knife. But that was combat, that was war. It was perfectly acceptable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you might have some explaining to do as a beat cop on the west side of Chicago if he took out 3 guys with a knife. Like they might not look at that with the same sort of understanding eye in that context.
Yeah. So what was your thought it would be if? Well, so and that story you just told me. Did the other 3 have weapons?
Yes.
All right. So if you got one lethal weapon versus another lethal weapon,
it's like there's no disparity of force, right?
Right. Yeah.
But then there's that aspect too of, and I hate to say it because it makes me crazy that we have to think about this, but onus in the U.S., right? Especially as a civilian, or as law enforcement, because if anything, law enforcement is judged more harshly than a civilian. There's a consideration of optics that has to take place.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody to ever think about how something looks and die because of it. Like, I'm not saying that at all, right?
Right.
But if you're choosing multiple options that are viable, sometimes you have to choose the option that is viable and doesn't look as bad. Just because of the way things shake out these days. And I really don't want guys, before you flame me in the comments, everybody, I'm not saying you should die for optics. That's not my point. But it is something you have to consider. There's the fight, and then there's the fight after the fight.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. That's what a tough position to put in, put people in. Which tells me also says that more people need training.
Yes.
Even I would say police that, and I back the police and what they do, and there's a certain part of, how do I say this without being
training is not always sufficient. We can put it that way.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, there's times where I've seen like, well, if you had a little bit more training, you wouldn't be in that position to do that. Like that wouldn't have happened. And I think the knife comes into play. As soon as somebody brings out the knife, it's like how many people freak out. I know the whole, you got the whole 21-foot rule or 21-foot principle, or the tool principle. But again, that's just a principle, and a lot of that stuff can be shortened if you have the right timing or have the right training.
Well, and everybody conveniently forgets the fact that was Danny Inosanto in that demonstration, and that he was a track star in college, not just a FMA guru.
Yeah, right. So,
I mean, which is fine. I actually like that because it's the worst case scenario. You've got
Yeah.
somebody incredibly skilled with a knife who's also a very good sprinter.
Yeah.
So that's the worst case. You should use the worst case to evaluate, not the best case.
And if you just simplified that a little bit more, and you kind of said it, which was one sprinting and an edge weapon. So you can give anybody, pretty much anybody athletic, or even just somebody can sprint and run toward you with a blade. If you're standing in place and you go to draw, you in 21 feet or even more in a lot of cases. But definitely if it's closer, you're in deep crap. Once you start to get that's how they kind of segmented it out, right? Or have the drill where the guy's running and you're staying in the same spot, you're not getting offline, and you draw. At what point is that the guy who's running, how close can they get by the time you get out the present?
Yeah.
Of course, that all changes once you start moving, and then you start angling, and you understand. You don't freak out, and you kind of understand that you get pattern recognition, and you understand tactics. And that's going back to what I was saying earlier about it's about what it does, it's not about the actual blade itself, metal, the scary metal thing, but what the training methodology does for you for everything else that you do. So whether you're using a firearm, right? Firearm is probably going to be the first thing I go to in a weapon altercation, depending on a couple factors. But I go to that more so than a knife, but I train with a knife more. Especially in a extreme close quarter, extreme close quarter. So it kind of gives you that framework of knowing where to move, like at what range and at what time and what to look for.
Well, and there's another factor there too that you kind of touched on, but in case people didn't pick up on it. And so defending yourself against a knife is incredibly hard to do. It's really difficult to do.
Very. Yep.
But it's a little less difficult if you know how to use a knife well, because now you understand it better.
Yeah. Yeah. So the more you learn about it and how people deploy it, and you can get not factoring in all the psychology of criminal and ambushes and things like that. But once it starts moving, goes dynamic, a lot of that fear decreases because now you know everything looks slower now. It doesn't look nearly as fast. Like I remember one of my first classes, I'm like, there's a reason why I started taking Pikiti. It was because I was, just the fear of a knife can be overwhelming for some people. And I thought, man, at that point in my training, I'm like, I had nothing for that. So I needed something. And in comparing that day till now, completely different.
Yeah.
Not to say that, somebody's never going to get cut. That's, you just don't put your head there all the time, which I hate the saying. And then there's always one of those guys in every video that you see with somebody trained with a knife, expect to be cut. No one do. Best defense is running. And it's like, well, yes and no.
But yes, but
yeah, right.
So back to YouTube again, right? There's a guy named Roykus on YouTube that puts on this international world self-defense challenge.
The one in Australia or something like that.
Yeah. And they always do one where the good guys are supposed to just try to run away. Mm-hmm. And the only guys who ever made it were a couple parkour guys. Because running away is harder than people think.
Yeah, right. And I love that you brought out the whole parkour thing. So I tell people, I go, if you have parkour in your background, I said that's a form of self-protection because you can dodge, get around things, you can scale up or scale down or jump down. I mean, more so than anybody else with bad knees.
Well, and it's so, and I'm as guilty of that. Like I've done a little parkour when I was younger before my joints went to crap, right? And I don't mean like I wasn't young like the teenagers that were doing it. I did it because I was an adult and I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because it's training the flight part of fight or flight. We all train the fight part. None of us train the flight part.
Yeah,
and sometimes it is the wisest decision, especially if you can get away.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Or I mean, just sprinting to some sort of barrier, right? And just in that moment. And knowing how far and then benchmarking that, like how far you can get in a certain amount of time so you don't get cut or you don't, we can put that barrier in between.
Well, and here's another rabbit hole, right? How many adults who are no longer competitive athletes do any sort of sprinting in their training? Almost none.
Almost, yeah. I would say almost
And
none.
it's literally one of the best things you can do for your body, not just for application.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
You know, it's got huge benefits. I still, I mean, you know, I make sure I don't do it on concrete because my joints are shot. Right. But I do sprinting regularly in my workouts.
Yeah.
Both because, like you said, you need to be able to run away.
Yeah.
And two, because it's so good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you don't wreck your legs that day at the gym. That's my example. Is like, you may not be able to run. You just got out of the gym and you wreck your legs because you just did, 10 sets of squats and 10 sets of something else, and then your legs are just jello. It's like you're not running anywhere, right?
No.
And then you're going even fighting at that point is going to be really difficult in place. So yeah, there's always everything is going to have to have nuance and context, and but running is definitely something we have kind of like in our everyday class, because even if it's 3 steps, so when we talk about the bikini tertiary takeoff,
Yeah,
that's how I explain it. It's literally you take 1 step, that's the takeoff, but that's also running 1 step. If you can load the legs and take off to that first position, that's like running 1 step. So if you can run and it's based around running, and everybody can run. Everybody wants to like overcomplicate footwork. And a lot of times you don't have to, but that's just other than the juke that happens, the little deception. But the takeoff and the run is really important, and that's whether you can bridge. You might need that ability to be able to bridge the gap faster. So catching somebody's arm when they're going, or the hand going to the waistline, indexing a blade or something. You need to be able to bridge fast. That's it. I mean,
well, and even that little juke step at the beginning of the takeoff, right? Like in a lot of ways, that's just a plyo step, like you do
right? Yeah, plyometric.
for any sort. Yeah. to gain that acceleration. I mean, there's a deceptive factor to the head movement, but the lower body is just doing a plyo step, like any strength and conditioning coach would teach you. So,
100%.
Because the body just moves the way the body moves. It doesn't change because you have a knife or a gun or anything else.
Exactly. This is one of the reasons why I still do some of the stuff that I have my background with Kempo and kickboxing and some jiu-jitsu. But Bikini has been that thing where, at least until I'm as old, when I'm 70, we'll check back in. But 53 now, I'm still practicing those explosive movements, and then being able to then apply that to everything else. So whether it's running the cover, or grabbing a gun and going to work, but same.
How old is he's got to be?
Wow.
He's got to be in his 80s, right?
Oh yeah, he's in his either very late 80s. I forget now. Haven't seen GT in a while. His birthday is Cinco de Mayo, so there's that I remember. But yeah, he's up there, and you can see anybody that learns from GT right now, they're not getting the full GT, from back when he was younger and he can really move around. Even 15, 20 years ago, it's the way he moves and the way he teaches is different. And you can kind of see like the mechanics are just different because he's older, right?
Yeah.
And you're not going to have the same range of motion. You're not going to have the same speed. And if he's not coaching you in a way, to do certain things, like coaches, wrestling coaches, they might not be able to do a lot of other things, but they can coach people through everything. Same thing with football, right? Or any coaching sport, or any sport that has a coach. So you can kind of extend your ability to transfer knowledge to people. As long as you can coach them through that and understand body mechanics, then you should come out on the other side of pretty skilled.
So what are your last thoughts on the whole EDC knife thing? And let's wrap that part of it up. What would you tell people who don't have an edge weapon background that are thinking about adding a knife to their, because a lot of guys that carry a gun carry a knife.
Yeah.
Like, everybody from the clinch pick ECQC crowd, which is a great class, great course. I like Craig a lot. Down to people with the SOC P knife like me with my background, right? What would you say to everybody who's what would be your short, sweet message to people that are going to be carrying a knife as an EDC that don't have the background?
Get the background. That would be my first. Right. I mean, still carry it because even at some level with people with a knife, they're not real. I know some people that didn't even like. They couldn't get used to having a knife in their hand just because they were a little afraid of it. Just get used to cutting boxes and different things and having it on you. That's one level of getting rid of that apprehension. Second would be, or actually the first one's always get training. The answer is always in training, right? The way is in training. And,
Way is in training.
Way is in training. So it would be that, and to do it, if you're going to train, do it in a way that is in its most simple and practical form. When you if you think you're going to get the same kind of skill set from just training a Filipino martial arts generically, you're not going to get that training, or not that skill set. And I'll go to my grave with that, because there's a way to train everything, especially when it comes down to the knife, practically or culturally. If you got 10 years, you want to take your good old time and do it and just love it, cool. But if you want to be able to use it today or tomorrow, or the faster you can gain that skill, acquire that, hard code that skill, you got to have a different training methodology, which means different tactics also. So, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Yep.
That is a good catchphrase for pretty much all of this, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah. Right.
We tend to, and this goes back to nuance and context, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what makes somebody really good at shooting or at fighting with a knife or at fighting empty-handed? Is it being able to throw like a 360-degree tornado kick like all the tricksters do?
Right.
Or is it being able to do a really good teep like the Muay Thai guys do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or what is it Lee said? He doesn't fear the guy that knows 10,000 kicks. He fears a guy that's done one kick 10,000 times.
Yeah.
The secret's in the details, not in how complicated you can make it.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. I just ran a kickboxing class the other day, and once in a while, give my students a nugget of fun. They might, if they think my class is too boring because we do too few things. I'll really concentrate on. I have the same methodology for kickboxing, where it's simplify and being able to do a lot of that stuff under pressure, and at any point, and you're just changing angles, and you're controlling ranging timing, and you can still you can fight with three things. And then we started doing a jab to get close, and then an elbow right as we start to flank. And they immediately wanted to do spinning elbows after that. Right. And it turned into this whole like spinny thing. And I'm like, all right, go ahead with it. But I know you're thinking at this point, and it's not all that impractical. It's just an angle change. But it was funny how that came out. We're trying to do something really practical, and they always want to push the envelope on something that looks flashier. So it was just kind of went with it that one night, but it's kind of funny.
And to a certain degree, not all of that is bad, right? If you're going to, like you said, if you're the guy that's going to train for 30, 40, 50 years, you need some of that. You need some fun. There needs to be like an element of play, right? To keep you in it.
Yep.
But it shouldn't be the central message, I guess. I don't think.
Yeah, because you skip all, like you're talking about, the full fundamental part of it, and the thing to get you into that neural pathway or into that flow. For you to be able to get there, you got to have all that foundation.
All right. And on that note, on the proper training methodology note, let's let everybody know how to get a hold of you and schedule classes or hire you as a consultant and all that good stuff.
You can go to radiusfactor.com. That's to see everything that I do there. And then I'm also on the socials, on Instagram or Radius Factor, and Facebook also. Facebook, I don't post as much there. A lot more in the stories, but Instagram a little bit more active there. And anybody can contact me through my website, and be happy to, talk back and forth with them and try to help solve some training issues.
There is some good to social media. The problem is it's in a sea of toxicity, right?
Yeah. Is that like a litmus test of the current current culture. I don't know. I mean, how we are as a society, and it's no different. I mean, we're talking to people over technology, and as opposed to in person. It's something really bizarre that really happens with that context.
And I think so. They've done a study. I saw a study recently where they were looking at the effects of AI on cognitive ability and how it's got deleterious effects for cognitive ability. It takes smart people and makes them dumber because they start relying on something else to do their thinking for them.
Yeah.
And they've done the other studies, right, about the dopamine hits of social media and how it shortens your attention span and takes away your ability to, like we were talking earlier, look at context and nuance, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's like everything else. I think the key is having the awareness of the effects and the discipline to avoid the negative and take it for what's good, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely something really hard to navigate. I mean, I think everybody can fall into that scenario where you're just scrolling and you're looking for that, unknowingly looking for that dopamine hit because certain things make you feel good, and certain ways they design
yes,
the apps. And I have a design background, so I can kind of pick up on some of those things. But in other cases,
and then they turn it into because it's not just the dopamine of what you're seeing; it becomes a dopamine of the reward you get for posting.
Yeah.
And the things they reward with the algorithms are very calculated, right? And it drives me crazy when I'm trying to put out something, because I'll spend hours on something that I think is insightful and important and that has value, and it gets nothing. And then some days I'll be like, I haven't put anything up in a few days. I'll put up something just a quick hit just to keep my account active, right? That means nothing.
Yeah.
And that's the one that gets all the reward. And the one that I was actually like thoughtful and tried to articulate something important goes nowhere.
Yeah. Same. Same. In the industries we're in, we kind of get hit a little bit or throttled a lot more than, all the other stuff. So I think there's certain things at play there with social media and controlling and manipulating people and what gets attention and what doesn't.
There's always been mechanisms of control.
Yep.
And people are always going to try to use those mechanisms to better themselves at others' expense, I guess.
Yeah.
And on that cheerful note, all right. So I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Definitely check out Joel's stuff. It's very valuable. And seek him out for training. You won't regret it.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. And we'll see everybody again next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.